Well, thank you very much for staying with us here on the Business Breakfast on Zed 101.9 FM. We're going to get into our roundtable discussion very, very soon. We're getting our guests seated, and then we bring you the conversation. As I indicated earlier this morning, we're going to talk about we're doing part 2 of yesterday's conversation. Now, yesterday we started a conversation around the impact of the budget on Ghanaian businesses, and we're going to get into that conversation very soon. So stay tuned.
It's your lifestyle, leisure, and business radio. Your lifestyle, leisure, and business radio. It's your lifestyle, leisure, and business radio.
Zed 101.9 FM.
lifestyle lurcher and business radio.
101.9 FM.
It's your lifestyle lurcher and business radio.
Zed 101.9 FM.
Stay tuned to your lifestyle, leisure, and business radio.
It's your lifestyle lurcher and business radio.
Well, 5 minutes to the top of the hour, and this is Business Breakfast on Zed with me, Nietzsche Hammond. We're settled for our roundtable discussion this morning, and today we're going to continue with a breakdown of the 2025 budget presented by the Finance Minister, Dr. Kesia Olatufosin. Now, the budget, of course, outlines certain major policies, including the 24-hour economy, some tax reforms, some debt management strategies, and initiatives to stabilize the city. But what exactly do these mean for businesses? Yesterday, we started a conversation. Today, we're going to continue. Joining me to unpack this, of course, Abel Ansoliwin Amodiok, governance and policy strategies, who is seated in studio right now. We're also going to be joined over the phone lines by Emmanuel Boateng later in the conversation, and also economic policy analyst Ebenezer Oakley, and then in studio by the associate director in charge of in the financial department or financial advisory unit of Deloitte Ghana. He will be joining me in studio very soon. As and when it comes, we will introduce him to you. But let's start a conversation. Abel, good morning. How are you?
Ralph, good morning. And thank you
for the first time you're in our studios.
Yes. Great to be in your studios. Very nice space and refreshing. Yeah.
Thank you. We're grateful. So today we're going to talk about the 24-hour economy, right? But let's touch on a few of the social policies in the budget. And I think a major one is in line of education. But I mean, you are also an academician, and so you can speak largely about that. But do you think that the budget in line in terms of education this year is solid?
Yeah, I think so. Very solid. If you look at the provisions that have been made for some key areas, then, and also I think if you look at the data that the Finance Ministry have put out, if you look at some of the key sectors in the education area that allocations have been done, there have been an increase, even with the former government's flagship program, Free Senior High School.
Right.
You can tell that the provision that has been made is more than what was allocated last year. So generally with education, the budget has been very progressive in terms of the allocations that have been made.
And the uncapping of the GET fund.
Huge. And I think government did that from the explanation. The sole purpose for doing that is to ensure that GET fund now becomes the sponsor or the funding agency for Free Senior High School. Of course, the conversation is still ongoing on whether GET fund should focus on funding Free Senior High School instead of what we've known it for, funding infrastructure across the education sector. But government argues that if you look at if they uncap the fund, I think it's around 4 billion that it is going to bring, and that 4.1 billion, yes, that the uncapping will make available to GET fund. And if you look at the Free Senior High School program, government is budgeting 3.5 billion for this particular year. So if you take 3.5 billion, let's say if at the end of the day they uncapping is now, they are now bringing the particular act, I think is Capping and Realignment Act to Parliament for the review.
Right.
So at the end of the year, if those proceeds come, the 3.5 billion that will go to the free senior high school out of 4.1 billion, you are still looking at something in excess of 600 million Ghana cedis that can be used to support Get Fund in other areas. And the argument, if you look at it, is pretty straightforward.
Right.
These are monies that was not available to Get Fund because of the capping. So even before Get Fund allocation will get to the fund, this particular money would have been taken away from them.
Right.
You understand? So if you uncap, then it means that now these extra resources will come to them. And the question is whether the capping also affected their main focus on infrastructure. That is something we agree with.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I personally agree, because if you look at the arguments that were made for uncapping Get Fund, it was basically to do with infrastructure in the education area.
Right.
So if you uncap, and then a chunk of it is going to free senior high school, because what will be left is 600 million Ghana cedis. The question is whether that 600 million Ghana cedis that will be available to Get Fund, if it can help Get Fund improve upon the infrastructural development across the various not only tertiary, various educational facilities across the country.
Right.
And that is an argument that or a point that can be made.
Right.
But you also look at the conversation on textbooks to basic schools, from kindergarten, primary, and junior high school, what we consider basic education. I think in the past few years, that is a conversation that we've had on multiple platforms, that government had brought a curriculum without textbooks for basic education. And now allocations have been made in that particular area to ensure that some textbooks will be provided. So that is also another gap that is being closed, and I think it's very commendable in the area of education. You look at school feeding program. I think if you look at the allocation, it's about 30%. If my memory serves me right, it's about 30% increase in what was allocated last year, and in fact now per student the allocation has been increased from 1 cedi 50 pesos to 2 Ghana cedis, and for me that is also significant enough. But even though, of course, some can argue that we can do better, because 2 cedis cannot actually provide a meal for a child, but we are looking at it in aggregate quantity,
right?
Because if the number of students in a particular institution, if you bring them together and you put the 2 cedis together for that number, then it can do something. In fact, the caterers for school feeding have commended government for yes for the increase, and we can only ask for more, like Oliver Twist. But that is also a move that can be described as progressive, that government is listening to the concerns of people, stakeholders within the education sector. Many more.
A major one too is a free tertiary
for persons with disabilities. Great move. I think it was promised. People ask questions. To be fair, I think it was promised both by the NPP and NDC.
Oh, okay.
And it was in the NDC's 2020 manifesto, and I recall conversations about NPP tapping into that. But questions were asked how government was going to do it. And I think, again, government has shown that with its ambitious revenue targets that it has set for itself, all things being equal, if they are able to generate that revenue, then the free tertiary education for persons with disabilities will be fully implemented this year when the budget is approved. So that is also a great move, especially in the area of social intervention. Aside the no fee stress for the first academic year that is being implemented. So all across education, I can say confidently that the budget has been progressive in that particular area, and we can only asks that government should do more in that area. But for now, we can commend government for the allocations that have been done to the area of education.
Well, I mean, those are very good initiatives. I personally, I have, commended the government for some of these initiatives. But the conversations have been around the sustainability of the funding, because sometimes we start certain initiatives like this, and we started free SHS on the same note. But today we see that we had issues with funding until now that Get Fund has been uncapped. So, what do you think about that? The issue of funding?
Yes, true. I think as government continue to improve on revenue collection, we can look at providing some buffers not even buffers, maybe dedicated source of funding for some of these programs. But I think that if you look at the conversation, it's because it's flowing from free secondary education, because the conversation was that if a student goes through free secondary education and after that, what is next? If that student cannot access tertiary education.
Right.
So this particular, we can see in this budget, government has provided two pathways. One of them is the National Apprenticeship Program. So after secondary education, if you cannot go through the formal education sector proceed to tertiary education, then you can opt out for a National Apprenticeship Program, which government has allocated, I think, in the area of 350 million Ghana cedis to support people in private sector that will be willing to provide some skills training to the unemployed youth, and at the end of the day, government will provide them with support in terms of equipment and funding to start their own businesses. So right after secondary education, that is one of the opportunities that is available for students. The other pathway is for you to go through tertiary education. And in that particular area, government says, I'll take care of the tuition aspect. So government is not even taking care of everything. It's taking care of only tuition. And then you find money for the rest of the smaller units of your fees. Okay. So once that is done for the first year, the argument is what of second year, third year, and also fourth year? Government's argument is that you can fall on the student's loan to finance the remaining until you are done, and then you pay back. So I think possibly going forward, what government will be seeking to do is to then migrate all of them onto the student's loan, so that maybe once you enter from first year, student loan can kick in and then cover you, so that once you are done with your education after the 4 years and there are jobs in the system, then you can pay back. That is what I foresee going forward. But if that is not the case, government will definitely also have to come back to that conversation on how to ensure that the free tertiary education for persons with disabilities and that of the no fee stress for first year students are looked at. How sustainable is it going to be, and what key funding can government look into so that you can cater for some of those areas,
Right. Well, let's, thank you very much for those thoughts. Well, it's exactly 9 after 9, and this is Business Breakfast on Zed. Now, this morning, we're having a conversation, a continued conversation on the budget that was read in Parliament by the Honorable Kesel Atto-Forsing. We are actually today looking at certain issues in the budget. We're focusing on the cost of doing business and also the 24-hour economic policy. And the underlying factor is that we're looking at the impact of the budget really on Ghanaian businesses. And I've been joined by I mean, Abel and Solowin is already seated here, and we've just been joined by Dennis Brown, who is from Deloitte, Ghana, and he is part of their financial advisory unit at Deloitte, and he's going to help us understand a few things. Over the phone lines also is Emmanuel Boateng, our economic analyst here at Zed, and so we're going to get into the conversation right away. Dennis, you're welcome.
Yeah, thanks. Nia Trebi.
Yeah.
It's nice to be here.
Yeah.
This is my third time, I think.
Wow.
I've been here a couple of times with Jerry.
Okay.
On the morning shows. One of them was also to discuss the media budget last year.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. And today we're discussing the 2025 budget.
Yes.
I see. All right, let's get into the conversation. Ima, good morning. Let me also check on Ima. Ima, good morning.
Good morning, Raphael.
How are you doing?
I'm well. How about you?
Yeah, I'm doing great. I'm glad that you joined us this morning. So Emmanuel is our economic analyst here at Zed. We're going to get into the conversation right away. Now, of course, the government is implementing certain policies to, of course, stabilize the CD and manage inflation. But the big question is that will these be enough to control exchange rate volatility? And let me ask Dennis, would these be enough?
Well, like they say, government is a continuum, and so you're not really looking at the end thereof, because so far as we continue developing as a developing economy, we will consistently need to revise our notes in terms of the strategies that we adopt based on the exigencies of the time. So we can't sit here and say, this will be enough. 3 months further down the line, something else may happen globally, and you would have to go back and scrap all of that and look at new strategies. But the strategies that they have proposed, these are not really novel. Okay. These are the very things we've been talking about, over the years, and we probably would have seen semblance of those in previous budgets. We know what is ailing in our economy. We know it has to do with the structure of our economy. That's the bottom line. The fact that about maybe...
What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I'm about to explain that. The fact that about maybe 80%, this is not factual, just drawing the picture. The fact that about maybe 80% of the things that we consume in our households are imported is a huge challenge, when actually there's a huge chunk of that can be produced here locally if we can organize the value chains around them properly so that they can compete with the imports. That's what it is. Until you do that, until you're able to do that, they are going to keep facing perennial issues relating to exchange rate volatility, because people must consume, and if what they have to consume is either not available or available here but at a significantly higher price than they can afford, then they will opt for the imported ones, just to continue life. So so you look at one of the key suggestions they talked about, for transformation agenda, which has to do with identifying certain key commodities and developing the value chains around those commodities. So not just ability to produce and for it to arrive at the market at the right price, but to also add value along the chain. This actually kills a lot of problems if we can do it. For instance, creating employment along the chain, because then you're adding value, but also improves productivity, so much so that we have them in the market. And if we can organize the other segments of the value chain, including key facilitations like roads, railways, other facilitations that will help it arrive at the market at the right price, then we'll be able to reduce our import bill significantly, which exerts significant pressure on our FX. It's demand and supply, really. As far as we continue to demand FX to import these goods, then we are going to keep facing these challenges. Okay, so if we find a way to rewire it such that we can reduce our import bills significantly by even consuming what we produce here, even if we are not ready for exports.
But how much of the things do we even produce here?
Yeah, but it's not about what we produce here. It's about what we have capacity to produce here.
Okay.
So there are a lot of them that we can produce here, but the economics has not made sense for entrepreneurs. That's why they don't. What makes sense for them is importing and making your margin on it. And people have tried all sort of things, and it's proven to be that the value chains have not been properly developed. So we have instances where food, if you take food inflation is the key driver of our headline inflation.
Yeah.
Now, there are instances where we have bumper harvest, right? We're selling food commodities in the places where they are produced. But you come to the major market centers, in the city centers like Accra, etc., and those goods are expensive because what the entrepreneurs go through to cut those goods, to store them, to bring them to the market centers adds significant, cost to it.
Right.
If we can do that, maybe at half that cost or maybe a quarter of that cost, then you can see the impact in terms of the price that it arrives at the market. Okay, and then you can compete with the imported, goods. Because you can't just keep asking people to just switch their taste. It also is a function of their pocket. Yeah. If I have to switch my taste, well, I may be patriotic, but at the end of the day, I may not be able to afford the local product. So I have to be in that position.
Because there's a narrative that local products are very expensive compared to...
because the value chains around the production and how we get it to the market has not been properly developed. They are not very efficient.
Right.
Okay.
So what are the specifics? What are the things that we have to do?
Yeah. So for instance, if you look at agric production, there are certain products that we should comfortably be able to produce here, and we are doing that, except that sometimes it doesn't make sense for the entrepreneur, so they rather would manage their risks by, lowering production, things like yam, cassava, and all of that, even cocoa, right? We have instances where lands are being given out to
galamseyers and all of that.
Galamseyers and all, because the money at the end makes sense for their toil. Okay, so if you look at everything in between, how do you store when you have bumper harvest, right? How do you cut from the production centers to the market centers? Those that organize the enterprise around that, what is the cost? At which they do that, and does those costs add too much or significant margin to the price? Because if you're organizing that kind of enterprise, you want to make profit as well. Look at fuel for cutting those goods,
right?
So if we can identify those segments along the value chain, and develop strategies to significantly reduce the cost, then we'll be making progress, because then you're looking at instances where these products will arrive at the market, at a price that can compete with the local imports, and then help deal with the inflation issue, right? Because it's the economics, it must work. That is what must work first. You can appeal to people's emotions, but really it's down to their pockets and what they can afford. So so that's, they talked about the agric for transformation, which I think is very key. And also in terms of results, I mean, we have to be measured. It's not something that you tend to see the results in 1 year. If you're having to reorganize the value chains along these sectors, it will take some time, but it will be good for us to see some significant progress up to a point this year, and then to build up on it the following year. Right. Then they talked about bringing the gold board to show up our FX reserve. I'm interested in seeing the details to ascertain how different that is from the gold for oil, because the gold for oil was also supposed to serve that same purpose, but I'm understanding that that's something that I just got to know that's something they want to suspend. So if you are suspending that and bringing in the gold board, perhaps you must clearly show that this is not the same thing in a different name, because if this has not worked, then we should pick the lessons to make this new one work by modifying it properly. So these are some of the way. They also want to at least from now to maybe the medium, they want to reduce their reliance on external debt, which is also another key thing. When you have now contracted loans in USD, the repayment of both interest and principal must be in USD. So to the extent that they have a good plan to manage that, to either stay away or minimize that significantly, it also reduces the pressure that it has on your FX. In fact, let me take us back to agric a bit. Cocoa, right, is a special product for us. Now, cocoa is a special product even in terms of impact on our FX reserves. Why? Because when you look at the other commodities that are exported that also generate FX, it is probably cocoa that adds more in terms of actual inflows into Bank of Ghana's coffers to boost the FX reserve. Why? Because government is at the helm of that enterprise via COCOBOT.
Right.
So they organize the value chains, and they basically control where the FX earnings end. Unlike commodities like timber, like gold, like some bauxite, some of these other enterprises that are organized by private investors and enterprise. All that comes to government will be the carried interest, sometimes 10%. From the extractives, government's 10% interest in there, so that applies to the revenues and then the taxes that they get from these enterprises. In terms of the net earnings to those that organize these enterprises, we don't have stringent FX regime in terms of even the retention policies. So they get to decide where those FX earnings, are kept or, end up. So typically what you see, and I think last year, the former vice president had started complaining about that we need to look at our FX regime again. Perhaps look at the retention policy and see how we can get these companies to retain a bit more what they earn.
Right.
Currently, there's no strict rules around it, so they bring in just an infinitesimally small portion of it to just come and support the next round of operational cycle.
Right.
So basically, on paper you are earning millions of dollars, but just a small portion comes to support the FX reserve.
Right.
Unlike cocoa, so cocoa is very strategic for us. Yet over the last few years, we've seen significant decline in production. We used to be number one. Now Ivory Coast is doing 3 times the volume that we do, which is very significant. So, and we are price takers within the global scheme of things. So world market price determines the value. And so what you can control is the volume. And so if what you can control, you have been that abysmal in terms of managing it, then you can see the impact that it has had on our FX reserve.
Right.
So that's an area that we need to prioritize.
I think the finance minister mentioned that in his speech in Parliament.
We need to prioritize that, and that will also help in boosting our FX reserve.
Right.
So on paper, these are good policies, but as we've come to see, we've had many good policies on previous budgets as well, especially when it's a new government and their first budget. There's this excitement around it. The challenge has always been how we ensure implementation, go as planned. And, avoid things like implementation being fraught with corrupt practices and inefficiencies. At the end of the day, you invest 1 million, you expect to see 2 million, and rather, you retain 500,000 kind of, inefficiency. Those are the areas that we need to prioritize going forward, because mostly in terms of the policies and how they appear on paper, they are quite sound.
Right.
It is the implementation of those policies that is the problem.
Right.
So.
Okay, thank you very much, Dennis. Let me bring Ima into the conversation. Ima? Hello, Ima?
Raphael.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. Now, the inflation is projected to be
sustainable. And you keep managing them in cycles, and the problem will keep coming until you change the structure of the economy. Can we get to the point where at least we are able to produce and consume about 50% of what we import to start with? The focus now within the short to medium term shouldn't even be on exports, because it takes a long time to develop the capacity to compete internationally in terms of the quality and the price that is needed out there. But locally, are you able to produce, to substitute those that you reduces your import bill significantly? And so, they should prioritize the agric as well as other key sectors like pharmaceuticals. I think they also mentioned metals and steel. There was also technology integration. There's one other sector that has escaped me, but those are sectors that in their manifesto they identified as key sectors that they believe we have the competitive and comparative advantage to produce, to feed ourselves locally. And if we manage to improve or build upon that going forward, we can then look at the regional market around us, using AFCA, the AFCA framework, to tap into the African markets, to then export. So the opportunities are there. We have to organize ourselves well.
All right, great. Now, Abel, let me bring you into the conversation. You are a policy person. Now, the government plans to reintroduce road tolls and streamline the tax administration. Do you think these policies will impact logistics and operational costs?
That's if you can be clear.
So, are these policies? I mean, the introduction of the road tolls and also streamlining our tax administration, will they impact logistics and also our operational costs?
Okay. Yes, but just to touch on some of the few things that they've discussed. Yes, of course. I think I agree with Dennis. Yes. Structural issues. And that is why you see the AETA program that government is investing in, a very crucial one, because they talk about Feed Ghana program, the Ghana Grains program, the Vegetable Development Project and all that. So government is seeking to ensure that some of the things that we import into this country, where we spend a lot of forex on, we can get that right in the country. And I think the allocation is about 1.5 billion to that particular program. And so once you can get some of the, in the short term, it might take some significant adjustment for you to have the immediate impact that you want. But in the long term, if we are able to get that investment right, then you are sure that you can cut the import that you are doing, and that in itself can also contribute to stabilizing your forex. So very important points that they've made in there. The road tolls, I think for now, I don't know, because they said they want to digitalize the process, the estimations have not been done yet. I think I listened to the finance minister yesterday say that the Ministry for Roads and Highways are still doing the estimates so that we'll know how much the introduction of technology into that particular space will yield for us. So then maybe we can, I think before it was yielding 70 million. That was the estimated figure, around 70 million Ghana cedis a year, which was not enough at all. And I think that was one of the arguments for the government abandoning it and going after the cost exactly. So it didn't make sense, because how much you put into get that, and then at the end of the day, what you get is a paltry sum. So it didn't make sense to government. That's why they abandoned it. But all over, I mean, major cities, major countries, road tolls is one of the best ways that you can use to maintain your roads and get things working. And so if you get that right through the introduction of technology, then it's definitely going to impact your economy positively. You know, so.
All right. You want to
your question around whether it will impact logistics? I don't know whether your thinking is whether the cost of logistics will go up as a result of that.
Essentially,
I don't think it's going to impact that significantly, because previously the worry has never been about road tolls making transportation expensive. Really, it wasn't the case. I think the argument for sidestepping it came from
Your call
government.
has been put on hold. Please
Right.
wait.
It came from government, and government's consideration was that when we look at the cost of administering the tolls and the processes around it, you are not even sure that what is actually collected there is what you realize. So when you compare what comes in and the cost that goes into it, it didn't really make sense.
Right.
And so that's why it was sidestepped. But bringing it back and hearing the minister now, acknowledge that technology can help us drive efficiency in that area, it is good, because then technology can automate things and ensure that whatever is paid is what is realized in government coffers. Will also ensure that people don't, have their own dealings behind the scenes, whilst others don't pay, right? And it's going to therefore reduce the cost of administration.
Yes, at the end of the day, government will get more, but transport will also pay. Maybe in the last year, for example, I mean, most road users, aside other taxes in different areas that they've been paying, they've not been paying road tolls.
Yeah.
Is that not it? So at the end of the day, you are going to pay something small, but I think if you compare that to if you are paying something small and then your roads are fixed, they are maintained well, and then there is, I mean, you are moving about doing your businesses, and I think businesses will have no problem with the small amount that they will be giving out for road tolls.
I mean, it's never been a problem.
Exactly.
That's the it's never been a problem. So
yeah.
that shouldn't be the case at all. I think it's proper that people pay to support our economic development. I mean, the freebies can sometimes be a bit too much.
Right.
It should go to specific areas that will really propel growth.
And maybe I think in that same area in terms of roads, I think government wants to uncap the road fund, and the argument was also that the capping that was done, majority of the funds was not going into road maintenance and all that. So at the end of the day, if you uncap all these things and then you introduce technology into road tolls and all that, and the funds don't go to the roads that they are meant to rehabilitate, maintain, and then build new ones, then we've not gone anywhere. So government must stick to the plan. If you are going to bring in technology to drive in efficiency, do that. If you have to fully automate, I've heard some people say we have to find a way to bring in those that were mounting the areas and all that. But if you have to fully automate to generate enough revenue to support your road sector, that is the way to go. Then you have to go and then find other innovative ways that you can get to employ some of those that were in the area. You don't.
But what happened to them within this period? I mean, since we introduced e-levy and cancelled that.
Well, we don't know exactly what happened to them. We can assume that they went out of job.
They went out. I think last year a lot of them. Last year, some of them were at the Ministry of Finance to protest.
Oh, really?
I think at a point there was conversation about bringing them, and at the time it was scrapped. Some even said they will be brought and put under a particular program. That was not done after some time. So I think last year at the Finance Ministry, some of them were there to protest and asked for government to do something about them. And that is why this current government is also saying that, okay, we'll automate, but we'll find a way to bring them in. That's why I'm making the point that if full automation will bring you more revenue and create more efficiency in the system, because at the end of the day, drivers don't want, when they get to the tolls, somebody have to issue tickets and things.
And all of
if
that.
you can fully automate, do that. Bring in the efficiency that you are looking for, and then find some other sectors that you can engage these people that can be productive for both government and, I mean, also get them some income. Yes. So also, if you uncap road fund, make sure it goes into, and I think a lot of the uncapping conversations that are going, get fund, NHI levy and all that, government must stick to its own assurances that it is giving the people of Ghana, that if you do this uncapping, let it go into the sectors that they are meant for. Don't divert the funds into other areas, because at the end of the day, like we've said, once there's efficiency and all that, and the funds come, and you are maintaining the roads and all that, even when you are increasing road tolls, drivers will not, the transport people will not care much. Sometimes, how much do they charge them? 2 cedis and all that.
I mean, one of the traps that you see developing economies falling in is sometimes fighting, trends that trends in battles that they can win. One of which is technology.
Exactly.
Right? You're not an island. Okay. You are not an island.
Right.
You are connected to the rest of the world out there. If you are not efficient, the next country will be efficient and will dislodge you from the market.
Yeah.
That's how it is. So sometimes, because of our social considerations, so there's the vulnerable, there's the poor, these people are sitting there collecting tolls. Why would you do that? So bring the manual system, let them go and sit there. You are just pricing yourself out of the market.
Yeah.
Because you are not an island unto yourself. So when there's technology that will improve your efficiency, you have to adopt it and find other ways to improve the skills of these other people. They are vulnerable because perhaps they are not that skilled. And so you now have to put them in, skill development programs
national
that are consistent with the kind of skills that are coming up and that are required based on the trends, even the technology trends. You can put them there if in the background, some of them, maybe even a few of them, will need to be trained in how to manage this same technology that you are bringing. That is the skill that you have to give them.
Right.
You can also put them in other places, depending on what we are seeing globally as the skills that are required in the modern world today. Instead of being overly protective in terms of our social consideration and say, oh, they are vulnerable, so let them still continue to be stacking these inefficiencies that we are dealing with.
Right.
No.
We'll shift our attention to 24-hour economy because of our time. But let me ask Ima. Ima, are you with me? Hello, Ima.
I am here.
Yeah, so generally, do you think this budget makes it easier to do business in Ghana?
Certainly, the spirit of the budget is that if you paid attention to what the finance minister was saying, that is what the budget is focused on.
Right.
How is that going to be achieved? Once the environment within which the business operates is conducive, in terms of how much it costs to do business, interest rates, monetary rates. Like I told you, in a week or so, a monetary policy committee was set to review their benchmarks as well. And so I think that in terms of what the government is doing or intends to do, it will generally drive output, and then that in itself would be able to boost performance across all sectors. But I must also add that there was something that I saw in the budget. I don't think much attention has been given to it. In terms of how government intends to finance its deficit, one, it has said the external source of financing will come from the IMF and the World Bank. The remainder is going to come from the Ghanaian market. When the government borrows a lot from the local market, what happens is that it crowds out the private sector. Right. And that, I think, is one of the things that we must pay attention to. That may not be too good for us if our taxation is not able to cover expenditure, and by way of financing the deficit, one, borrowing. Borrowing in itself makes us vulnerable to external uncertainty. But internally, when borrowing is a lot from the domestic market, that in itself has some direct impact on the private sector, such that the monies that should be lent out to the sector would now be going to the government, and that would affect their operations. And so, yes, in terms of their targets and the programs they seek to implement, it would drive output in the country, and that will help business in terms of their operations. But that part of their borrowing, where a chunk of their borrowing is going to come from the Ghanaian market, that I think would crowd out the private sector. Right.
Okay. Well, now let's come to the 24-hour economy. Now, government is pushing for a 24-hour economy, but the big question is that, is this feasible, given our current infrastructure, security challenges, and also energy? Is this feasible? Abel, let me start from you.
Very, very, very feasible. I mean, government has given indication that in terms of security, I think when we see the estimates from the Ministry of Interior, we'll get to know in terms of recruitment what will happen. But there have been indication that there's a need to add additional security, maybe around 20,000 police personnel.
Now, is it about men? Is it about men, or we have to put in some technological?
Yes, I think all that have been mentioned. I think in terms of even improving currently, I think the police service started, mounting cameras, CCTV cameras at some vantage points and things. So that is going to come from government, depending on the allocation you give to them, to continue such programs in terms of installation of cameras at vantage points, and then also the personnel. The personnel is important because the police to citizen ratio is also very critical, because if you have a police force that doesn't match your police to citizen ratio, then it also makes it difficult. Visibility on the grounds is also very important. If you don't have police or your security services are not visible on the ground, then they also encourage people to, do all sort of things. But once they are visible on the ground, both day and night, then businesses are assured and can also go around their businesses. But whether the 24-hour economy is visible, 3 things government is seeking to do with that. They said boost production, boost productivity, and then helps create well-paying jobs. And I think they said a policy document, because one of the things that we've been commenting on a policy, yet we don't have the details, the nitty-gritties of that particular policy. What does the policy really entail? So if you comment ahead of yourself, then you fall into it, because they've given indication that the policy will be coming to Parliament. They are seeking to amend the Labour Act and also the Ghana Investment Promotion Center, or is it council? They are seeking GIPC. They are seeking to also amend the GIPC Act to, for all of them to be aligned in terms of the 24-hour economy. But basically, if you also look at the general conversation around it, it says, like you said, in terms of businesses that are willing to employ more and operate 24-hour, government will give them some incentives. What are the incentives like? What is the structure like? So far, they've spoken about the off-peak electricity, but how that is going to be run, we are going to see that when the policy comes out. What other incentives are they going to give to businesses? Does it include tax exemptions and other things? We'll see. So all these things, if the policy comes out and we see the details and what is going to give businesses, then I'm sure businesses are going to be rest assured that once you sign up onto the program and you are receiving all these things, then you can also employ more people, and you can, then the 2 things that the first 2 aspects of the policy will be achievable, because you have to do that with businesses. If businesses are not employing more, then your production and the productivity you are seeking to increase will not be there. So you first have to create that enabling environment that will make businesses sign up onto. And already the policy have outlined the areas that they are seeking to, the businesses that they are seeking to deal with, those in industry, manufacturing, the pharmaceutical areas and things. As for the public sector, I don't see much will not happen in the public sector aside passport office and DVLA. There will not be much in the public sector. The 24-hour economy, I think, is going to be heavily driven by the private sector, and that is where government, I'm sure, will be focused on.
Right. Dennis, you seem to disagree with some of his points.
Oh, no, not really. Not really, but just to touch on a few things. The 24-hour economy policy is a beautiful policy. You can imagine if we are able to achieve that, the job creation, opportunities that we'll be blessed with. And this, for me, is the number 1 challenge in our economy, because you can talk about inflation, you can talk about exchange rate. When people have the capacity to generate income, it minimizes their concerns in that regard, or their hardships in that regard. But it's a double-edged sword. If inflation is going up, exchange rate is going up, but you don't have a job. So it's the first and foremost thing is how we can put our teeming youth on jobs, for them to generate income for themselves. So it's a good policy. Now we have to be cautious in the way we roll out the implementation. We have to be very cautious in the way we roll out the implementation. What we've noted is that African governments have the edge to jump the gun instead of following a certain, well-structured and thought-through process. So, for instance, one of the key things that have been mentioned is incentives. We'll give lower cost of power, for production within certain times of the day. We'll provide security. We'll provide other incentives. They are all fine. But I can tell you for free that in the entrepreneur's mind, that is not what they are looking for to move. The entrepreneur is looking at two things. Can I make profit? If I'm producing, how do I make profit? I'm able to produce at the price that is competitive in the market. And the market is actually available. So I'm not producing and now having headache as to how I'm going to sell. The market is there. So before we bring in incentives or any other thing, when we see enabling environment, that is what I want to see. We have to organize the environment such that the entrepreneur can clearly tell that this is something that I'll make profit from. How am I going to make that profit from? By ensuring that the cost of production is good enough to allow for a certain price that can compete with what is out there, and on top of it, the market is there. That's what the entrepreneur is looking for. If you do that, and you do that even well, at some point the entrepreneur will not wait for you to bring the incentives to go into it, because it makes sense business-wise. And then you can bring in the incentives to, if you like, whip them up more and even outcompete the imported products and whatnot. Then that's it. But if you go the other way and jump right into providing incentives, businesses in our part of the world have the penchant to manipulate things, and I can give you a clear insight. So let's say you introduce these incentives, and you haven't put proper systems and structures in place to ensure that those that sign on do what they promise. Because if you are giving that incentives, it means you are jumping onto maybe a 3 shift to produce. But if you don't have a structured system, but for which reason they are benefiting from the incentives, they are doing it, what will happen is that you can have instances where I shift my production time to the part of the day where I'm being given lower cost of power and free security and whatnot to benefit from. To that end, and so and take advantage of that for my end. What will make me do that? Because entrepreneurs, when they see the market, they'll produce more. So what will make me do that is when I don't see the market. You get it?
But to add, I think that this morning when you started, you talked about our problems. Most of our problems being very structural, and that you have to get things right. And I think that in getting past that structural problems that we've had, we've said that governments over the years have not been very deliberate in trying to stimulate change within the ecosystem, within our space. So if you look at this policy, very critical, and I'm mindful of some of my comments because a policy document will be coming soon, so you don't overcommit yourself with some of the things you say. If you look at it says government wants to be deliberate in ensuring that some businesses that are willing to come on board operate in a certain particular format that is different from how our economy has been run over the years. And in terms of the security is one aspect. It's not just only to ensure that it is available at night, but all around, so that businesses can feel comfortable and do that. Now, if you look at the other, because it dovetails into another area, accelerated export development, which Gusitano is in charge of. So the policy is that boost production. But whilst you are boosting production, government is also liaising or connecting the policy with another one, which has to do with accelerated export development. So that even if you boost the production and the local market can still not contain all that you've produced, government helps you to do what? To export your product outside. So it is going to, but I understand the caution that you are on, but we must also admit that we are asking for some changes within our system. When we see those changes, we must embrace it and then support government to go on that tangent. And I think that if you also realize the caution that you are asking for, government has been very deliberate in saying, let's wait, let's put the, because they've not jumped the gun. You've heard a lot of people, even some elements in opposition, have called out government for not rolling out their foremost, policy that was preached to the people. And government have been exercising caution and saying, no, we don't want to go the tangent of a once Ghana Beyond Aid policy that ended up at the IMF. we want to take our time. We want to have discussions with industry. We want to put, and we want to bring it to the people. So when that policy comes to Parliament, what it basically means is that it is before the people of Ghana. We can make our inputs, we can make adjustments to that policy document, we can critique some aspects of it, and then at the end of the day, fine-tune it to how it's going to benefit businesses for where you are coming from, especially because if businesses have a stake on how that policy at the end of the day is going to be shaped like, then once we get that right, then some of these things but I think for me the most important thing is that it's a deliberate action for the first time, I think so, by a government to attempt to change the very structure of our economy that operates from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Because it is not just transportation, it's going to have an effect on transportation. In some areas, when it is 8 p.m. in Accra, you can't get public transport again, unless you resort to private, Uber and taxis and all
which
that.
Are also expensive.
Which are also very expensive. So
well, I mean, I think I get what you are saying. Yeah, but essentially,
we're not saying anything different. We are cautioning. That's why discussions in platforms like this are important.
Very, very important.
That know what you prioritize, and by the time the policy framework comes up, we expect to see that, for instance, you are prioritizing how to create markets, how to organize the value chains, or the facilitating role that government will play in ensuring that the value chains, make sense and they are efficient. Then entrepreneurs will go there. What the point I'm making is that entrepreneurs not waiting to hear incentives and to jump.
Then jump on. That's not what they're looking for.
That's not what they're looking for. That's a top up. It's like you buy pizza and toppings.
But you didn't buy toppings, you bought
pizza. Exactly. So it's waiting to be clear that look, if I get into this value chain, the market is there. And government can have various ways of creating markets. For instance, in ensuring that there's local consumption of certain goods, it can create a policy where our schools, public hospitals, whatever, all those public entities, and government is a large spender, will be absorbing some of those. So the entrepreneur is assured that, okay, look, there's already some guarantee there. There might be a small portion that I'll take to the open market. And even with that, I should be comfortable that the way the value chain is organized, it will arrive at a price that is competitive with, the imported, because obviously I'm going to compete. Now we are in a world where you can't use quotas as policy, like you just get up and say, oh, they are importing chicken from here, so we cut it by half. Somebody will retaliate and collapse your economy.
Exactly.
You're a small economy. So you have to let the economy work for itself. So the people basically don't prefer imported chicken again. They are eating local chicken. No, it's not a policy that is driving that. It is some kind of internal arrangement that is ensuring that local production are matching the imported ones, and the economics is working. So that's what we are cautioning, that look, as it's a good thing, as we proceed, let's not overly prioritize the incentives, because incentives also introduces a lot of inefficiencies. Like I'm saying, people will take advantage of it, and if there is no solid way of monitoring them, they won't do what they commit to. They can move production times around, and they are producing the same amount and just enjoying from the benefit. So we need to look at it well. Also, I believe that in the very short term, of course, I believe this year it will be about setting the policy framework. I'm sure in terms of actual rollout, it probably start from next year. I'm sure this year it will be the policy framework. It will be thoroughly reviewed. Parliament will have input into it. So I'm not expecting much in terms of actual results. What I want us to also do this year is to prioritize developing the various value chains that we have identified, right? Because there are some of them that we haven't developed at all. There are some of them that the development is still at basic. You understand?
Like which ones?
So even the various agri-related value chains, right, that we know we have comparative advantage over. So you would agree with me that there are some of them that we just have all the factors of production at the primary level at play that can help us produce as much as we want. Yet entrepreneurs are hesitant to go there because they're also thinking of how it will come up in terms of the end of the value chain. So all the chains, transportation, storage, and other things, and how that will result in the ending price. So they are hesitant to go into those. So yes, government has identified those value chains, and I think the focus should be more on addressing the inefficiencies around those value chains, right? And creating the market at the end, okay? Not necessarily getting, so that would actually then result in, let's say, new industries.
Right.
And new industries, not only at the primary end, but along the value chain, some of them processing and all that, they will come on board. Those are not there exactly. So do not prioritize getting so much existing companies to quickly now start running the three shift and all. Let's take our time. Let's improve productivity in other sectors where the productivity is low. So we bring, a lot of the industries that we can actually,
Right. A very major thing we haven't paid attention to is energy. I mean, we're speaking about all of that. Do we have stable electricity? And also, in the budget that was read, the finance minister mentioned about 35 million Ghana cedis or so debts in the energy sector. And this will mean that businesses, there might be higher, probably tariffs on
and he actually mentioned that we are looking at tariff revision. You are looking at, and I think that is within the broader IMF framework, because the IMF was pushing for cost-reflective tariffs. Over time we build up all these subsidies so much so that you are not, if I want to invest to produce power, sometimes what you get out of there is not even enough to offset the cost, and it creates that huge mountain, a problem of debt, and so you can clearly the finance minister is trying for us to be efficient in that regard. In other places, the idea of power being cheap for residential facilities is long gone. Rather, they try to make power cheaper for industries. If you use it at home, you pay more. And so we have to begin to get closer to some of those efficiencies, because look, we are the one at the end of the problems when it comes. You might think today the government is giving you subsidy, but further down the line, it cycles into something vicious, and you're suffering. So the idea of trying to bring in cost reflective tariffs is not really bad. It's also consistent with the IMF framework in terms of the measures that they prescribe. So that we are likely to see that. But we talk of energy, I think the actual debt is actually $1.7 billion owed to IPPs and fuel suppliers. So that's a huge amount of
debts.
ACG, okay.
That's around 60 something.
Okay, that's a huge amount of debt to deal with, and the risk is that if we don't find a way to resolve that, of course, these IPPs produce a lot to feed the grid. And if it begins to have a toll on them, they might shut down their plants.
That's true.
And you can tell what will happen in terms of,
very, very important on the 24-hour economy. I think if any company is offering free toppings for you to buy pizza, a lot of us will want to buy. Is that not so? So for now, government says I'll give you free toppings. So if you are getting the free toppings, come on board. Then when you come on board, then we can. I I'm actually using his analogy.
Maybe the free toppings is to encourage the pizza producer to produce more, but he must assure himself that 10,000 will come and buy the pizza instead of the 5,000 that is buying currently. That's the whole thing. That's the point. That's the whole thing.
Yes. But there are other issues. Will people even be willing to work at night?
Oh, why not? I mean,
hold on one night.
Well, then those are the ones we have to ensure they never complain that there are no jobs.
A lot of Ghanaians leave the shores of this country and
they
get
work in all those
nights and all that.
That's the problem.
Of course, and it's about how, maybe if it's well paying. You understand? I mean, if it's well paying, what's the business? And you are assured of, and like, I think why people are, the question should be, why is that they are not comfortable working at night? Do you understand me? So maybe security, issues of transportation, among others. So you go out at night, are you safe going out? Yeah, coming back, are you safe in terms of transportation and all that? So if all those things are put, to rest.
I think people will prioritize anything that will put income in their pockets. No. I mean, if there are no jobs, the job that is there that you want to do is if you have to run night. No, not risk your. Well, people will risk their life. People will even risk their life, but you don't. There's no income coming from anywhere.
Those involved in Galamsey, are they not risking their lives?
I mean, every day is a risk.
Yes, but they want something. So they are willing to risk their lives. So at the end of the day, that's why I said if well-paying jobs are there, and it is at 9, and you are assured of security in the system, I think it will not be a challenge for people at all. Those who also have challenges working at night, I'm sure they'll be also looking at the daytime, maybe the opportunities that are available at daytime, and they can take advantage of those.
There's one other thing I also want to caution in terms of how we approach this 24-hour economy as well. Because the 24-hour economy is primarily to create jobs. Yes, and I mentioned already that developing economies, we have the penchant to fall into this trap of, let's accept this inefficient way because it engages more hands. It engages more hands. So if you are not careful, industries that probably are now being driven by technology, elsewhere, have become very efficient. Now you need to compete, because whatever you are doing here, you are competing with others. If you are not careful, the desire to engage more hands will lead us into selecting manual systems instead of, technology-driven systems that will help us compete. So we have to be careful. You go, yes, industry, let's not bring in machines. Let's just have labor hands because then they are engaged. We have to be mindful, because if you are not careful, that then introduces some inefficiencies. And
if you are also not careful, with unemployment increasing, you are sitting on a time bomb, a national security issue. So government has to balance the two.
You have to balance the two. For me,
but a major issue for me is also is whether the businesses will be able to pay, because they are now going to pay more security officers. They're going to pay more workers.
It's a function of the production.
They're going to pay more. So
it's a function of the and that is why I said the entrepreneur thinks about the market first. Because if he's producing 5 tons and he begins to produce 15 tons and there's market for it, he will pay the extra hands.
All right. Anyway,
that's
but in the industries you are talking about, anyway, those are conversations we'll have another time. There's so much to unpack when it comes to this 24-hour economy, and I hope that when the policy is out, we'll have more extensive conversations. But gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. Maybe final words in a minute.
No, I think my final words will be situated around the theme of the budget. I think what we are trying to do is strike a delicate balance between macroeconomic stability and growth. It's a very delicate balance, because it's a very difficult thing to do. Because when you want to achieve macroeconomic stability, especially for our type of economy, you resort to rationalizing expenditure. You resort to ensuring that, yes, you want to mobilize revenue, but you don't want to burden the people with too much taxes, right, in order to achieve a certain level of fiscal discipline. But those very things can also end up cutting the very investments that will propel growth, and yet you want to achieve economic growth. So you can clearly tell why they weren't overly aggressive in terms of the GDP growth for 2025, because you have to be very delicate in doing that. Acknowledge that the macroeconomic stability is what will set the foundation for sustainable growth going forward. So prioritize achieving that first. And I like that the way the budget sets it out. The theme is clear. Look, we are prioritizing macroeconomic stability because we've not had that in a while, and we've seen what that has done, including making this market unattractive to investors. Once you can sort out the macroeconomic stability issues, you begin to attract investors, and following on from there, you can begin to achieve sustainable growth. As the economy grows, it capacitates itself to create jobs, and so growth is also very important. But that's what I would say.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Abel, in 1 minute.
Yes, I think from policy point of view, governance is about solving societal problems. The budget has prescribed solutions to solving some key structural problems and that of societal problems, in terms of unemployment, in terms of unskilled labor, in terms of even insurance for those in the informal sector, among others, that the budget is delivering on, and that I can say it makes the 2025 budget a progressive one. And we can only commend government for that, and we'll see how the implementation will go.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Dennis Brown is the Associate Director at the Financial Advisory at Deloitte Ghana, and Abel Ansoliwin Amodiok is a Governance and Policy Strategist. Also over the phone lines, Emmanuel was with us. He is an economic policy analyst here at Zed, and we're grateful to you. We've had a deep dive into the 2025 budget, and one thing stands out: the 2024 economy policy is something that is very commendable. Just that we need to be sure that we are implementing it the right way. Thank you very much one more time to our guest and to our listeners. Please engage us on our social media platforms. How do you see the 2025 budget affecting your business? We'll be very glad to check your comments and probably air them in our subsequent bulletins. Subsequent shows, really. But thank you very much for tuning into Business Breakfast on Zed. My name is Nitrebi Hammond. We're back again tomorrow for the weekend edition of the Business Breakfast on Zed. Up next is the brighter side with NY the brand. She gave us some few minutes. NY, thank you very much. Stay informed, stay engaged, and have a productive day. When you think Ghana, think Zed. See you tomorrow.